Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Timeline Divergence. I am your host, The Drifter, and in this series, we explore the ultimate what-ifs of history, uncovering the lost technologies, forgotten civilizations, and parallel realities that could have been. Today, we're looking at a world where the devastating word cancer is nothing more than a historical footnote. Imagine a modern reality in the year 2026, where chemotherapy does not exist, where massive hospital wards filled with suffering and despair are entirely obsolete. If the historical timeline had not been violently altered, your local medical clinic would be a sanctuary of acoustic harmony and energetic balance. You would not see intravenous bags dripping toxic and synthetic chemicals into weakened veins. You would never smell the sterile, metallic scent of sickness that haunts our modern medical facilities. Instead, patients would sit comfortably in quiet, beautifully designed rooms. They would be bathed in precise light spectrums and resonant sound waves. Doctors would not poison the human body, hoping the disease dies before the patient does. They would use targeted electromagnetic frequencies to shatter microscopic pathogens completely harmlessly. Healing would be clean. Healing would be immediate and painless. The environment would be perfectly silent, completely free from the mechanical breathing of artificial life support machines and the quiet weeping of grieving families. A severe diagnosis would no longer be a death sentence. It would never be a terrifying path to absolute financial ruin. It would simply require a brief, entirely non-invasive session of cellular vibrational tuning. This parallel world would definitely be a paradise of human longevity and peak physical energy. We would live our entire lives without the constant, lingering fear of cellular mutation. We would trust our healthcare system to elevate our vital energy, not diminish it for endless profit. Our bodies would vibrate at the perfect frequency of absolute health. But that pristine timeline died in the year 1934. Let us travel back to the exact moment the timeline fractured. The location is a quiet medical clinic in Southern California. The air does not smell of bleach. It does not smell of despair. It smells faintly of ozone and heated glass. In the center of the dimly lit room sits a machine that looks like it belongs in a science fiction novel. This is the laboratory of Royal Raymond Rife. He is a brilliant optical engineer. He is a visionary microbiologist. Before him sits his absolute masterpiece. It is called the Universal Microscope. It is a towering and incredibly complex structure of hand-ground quartz prisms and polished brass. But the optical microscope is only half of the miracle. Beside it sits the legendary beam ray frequency generator. When the machine powers on, you do not hear the aggressive and terrifying beeping of modern medical monitors. You feel a deep, steady rhythm vibrating slowly through the wooden floorboards. It sounds exactly like a distant cello playing a single endless note. The room is softly bathed in the warm amber glow of massive vacuum tubes. This is not chemistry. This is acoustic physics. This is the precise intersection of pure light and sound. Rife understood a fundamental truth of the physical universe. Every physical entity has a resonant frequency. Every steel bridge, every glass pane, and every microscopic virus has a specific acoustic signature. If you sing at the exact pitch of a crystal wine glass, the glass will absorb the acoustic energy. It will violently shatter. Rife applied this exact acoustic physics to fatal human diseases. He spent long, exhaustive years meticulously tuning his delicate instruments. He would place a living pathogen under his brilliant optical microscope. Unlike modern microscopes that kill the specimen with toxic chemical stains, Rife used pure light. He would bathe the lethal organism in specific light frequencies until it vividly glowed. Then he would turn on his beam ray machine. He would dial in the exact mortal oscillatory rate of the virus. The physical sensation in the room would rapidly shift. The air would grow thick with unseen acoustic pressure. Under the glowing lens, the deadly bacteria would simply dissolve. It would burst completely from the inside out. The surrounding healthy tissue remained completely untouched. The healthy cells vibrated at an entirely different natural frequency. They were perfectly safe. It was a sniper rifle made of pure, invisible energy. There was no collateral damage. There was absolutely no poison. There was only absolute targeted destruction of the invading disease. In the warm summer of 1934, a highly specialized medical committee gathered. Historical records state they brought 16 terminally ill patients to the clinic. These were tragic people entirely abandoned by traditional medicine. They had exhausted all available treatments. They were sent there to die quietly. The clinical trial officially began. The treatment protocol was shockingly simple. The desperate patients did not endure agonizing invasive surgeries. They did not ingest highly toxic chemical compounds. They simply sat in a comfortable room with the frequency generator. They stayed there for 3 brief minutes, every 3 days. That was it. 3 minutes of acoustic harmony. The invisible waves penetrated their weakened bodies. The specific frequencies hunted the glowing pathogens in their blood. According to the surviving clinical documents, the medical results were staggering. Within exactly 90 days, 14 of the 16 terminal patients were declared completely cured by the strict committee of doctors. The remaining 2 patients were completely cured shortly after the initial 90 days. It was a 100% success rate against the most terrifying diseases known to human history. The global medical world was allegedly stunned. A massive and luxurious banquet was held in his honor. They bravely called it the end of all diseases. Humanity stood at the absolute threshold of a beautiful medical utopia. So why are our modern hospitals today still filled with unimaginable suffering? Why do we still bravely pump synthetic poison into our fragile veins? We must look closely at the terrifying economic reality of the early 20th century. This was the exact dawn of the massive industrial pharmaceutical complex. Powerful chemical empires were being rapidly built across the nation. These growing empires relied strictly on a very specific and highly profitable business model. They desperately needed chemical compounds. Synthetic chemicals can be easily patented by corporate lawyers. They can be cheaply pressed into millions of tiny uniform pills. They can be densely packed into plastic bottles and shipped across the entire globe for massive margins. Most importantly, chemical treatments require daily and ongoing consumption. They expertly create a lifelong dependency. They generate a never-ending stream of staggering corporate profit. The machine was the absolute opposite of scalable mass production. It was a highly complex optical instrument. It required a skilled and deeply dedicated technician to carefully tune the specific acoustic waves for every single individual. You cannot put a healing light beam in a tiny pill bottle. You cannot patent a universal sound frequency found in nature. You cannot charge a sick patient $10,000 every single month for a 3-minute acoustic session. The definitive cure truly existed, but the cure was sadly not scalable for maximum corporate profit. This is exactly where the dark shadows fall over our historical timeline. We must rely heavily on the historical rumors and the scattered surviving data. Official explanations often differ drastically from independent investigations. Public opinion at the time heavily rumored that the powerful head of the National Medical Association personally visited the laboratory. It is widely alleged that this incredibly influential figure aggressively offered to buy the exclusive rights to the frequency machine. The brilliant inventor bravely refused. He desperately wanted the healing technology to be completely free and accessible to all suffering people. That stubborn refusal was the fatal divergence point in our history. Immediately after this alleged meeting, the professional atmosphere drastically changed. A mysterious and highly organized medical boycott quietly began. The brilliant doctors who publicly supported the trials suddenly stopped talking to the press. Some of them reportedly lost their prestigious hospital privileges overnight. Others were entirely ruined financially by sudden, unexpected audits. Then came the sudden tragedies. Surviving documents heavily suggest that key medical partners died under circumstances that frightened witnesses described as highly questionable. Critical scientific evidence and decades of meticulous research notes mysteriously vanished overnight from securely locked laboratories. Many historical theories suggest that undercover agents were sent to physically dismantle the delicate laboratory equipment. Other hypotheses claim that the sudden fires in parallel research facilities were not accidental sparks, but deliberate acts of corporate sabotage. We may never know the absolute truth of these rumors. However, the historical suppression was absolute and incredibly systematic. But we must understand it was not necessarily driven by pure cartoonish evil. It was largely driven by a profound and paralyzing systemic fear. The emerging global medical empire was absolutely terrified of a world where they had zero economic control. They deeply feared the total collapse of their new, fragile business model. If fatal diseases could be completely cured in 3 minutes with a simple glass tube and a radio frequency, the massive pharmaceutical factories would become utterly worthless overnight. The global medical economy would violently crash. Millions of administrative jobs relying strictly on the profitable management of chronic illness would simply vanish. The complex system coldly chose to protect itself. It aggressively starved the frequency research of vital funding. It systematically discredited the optical physics in respected medical journals. They aggressively labeled him a dangerous fraud to carefully protect their chemical patents. He was eventually dragged into endless and exhausting lawsuits. The relentless legal battles completely drained his finances and thoroughly broke his creative spirit. He eventually died in extreme poverty and absolute obscurity. The perfect timeline was deliberately and methodically starved to death. We did not lose this miraculous technology because it failed to work. We lost it because it worked entirely too well. Let us project the survival of this delicate acoustic physics into the deep future. If the timeline did not violently break, the entire foundation of human existence would fundamentally shift. We would not heavily rely on the brutal hand of synthetic chemistry. We would completely master the elegant science of electromagnetism. The modern medical university would look entirely different today. Medical students would not mindlessly memorize endless lists of patented chemical compounds. They would deeply study advanced optical physics. They would master the intricate mathematics of cellular resonance. The massive global pharmaceutical empire simply would never form. There would be no massive chemical factories pouring toxic synthetic waste into our natural rivers. There would be no aggressive corporate lobbyists whispering in the quiet halls of government. The global economy of chronic illness would entirely evaporate. Instead of a trillion-dollar monopoly built tightly on lifelong chemical dependency, we would have a beautiful decentralized network of acoustic healing sanctuaries. Consider the staggering economic butterfly effect of a perfectly healthy population. In our current dark timeline, medical debt is a crushing global nightmare. Millions of hardworking families are completely bankrupted by a single severe diagnosis. They lose their generational homes to pay for toxic chemical drips. In the lost timeline, this absolute financial terror simply does not exist. The economic cost of curing a fatal cellular disease would be the mere cost of running a heavy light bulb for 3 brief minutes. Healthcare would essentially be free. It would be as abundant as the air we breathe. The immense wealth currently hoarded by medical monopolies would remain permanently in the hands of the ordinary working people. Global poverty would drastically plummet. Without the heavy financial burden of sickness, human creativity would absolutely explode. We would build magnificent futuristic cities instead of endless sterile hospitals. Step inside a medical sanctuary in this alternate year of 2026. The physical experience is profoundly beautiful. You do not walk into a cold, sterile building smelling sharply of heavy bleach and artificial antiseptics. You walk into a grand architectural masterpiece designed precisely for absolute acoustic perfection. The towering walls are lined with rich resonant woods and highly polished copper. The indoor air is perfectly clean and pleasantly warm. You do not hear the frantic rushing of exhausted nurses or the terrifying synthetic alarms of life support machines. The atmosphere is heavily wrapped in absolute silence. It is a profound and deeply healing quiet. You are gently guided into a private tuning chamber. You sit comfortably in a luxurious chair beneath a massive quartz crystal emitter. The medical engineer dials in your specific cellular frequency. You feel a gentle and warm vibration deep inside your chest. It is not painful. It is deeply relaxing. The specific frequency washes through your physical body like a quiet, invisible tide. You actually feel your vital energy rapidly rising. You feel the absolute harmony of your cellular structure snapping perfectly back into place. You walk out of the clinic 30 minutes later. You are completely cured. You are entirely whole. Now, brutally contrast this beautiful vision with the absolute absurdity of our current reality. They built quiet temples of acoustic harmony. We build massive concrete bunkers filled with toxic radiation. In the Lost Timeline, they gently tune the human body like a masterfully crafted musical instrument. In our timeline, we brutally turn the human body into a violent chemical battlefield. We aggressively pump synthetic poisons into our fragile veins. We blindly hope the toxic chemicals kill the fatal disease just moments before they kill the actual patient. It is a barbaric and deeply primitive approach to human health. We treat the human body as a clumsy mechanical engine to be constantly medicated. They understood the human body as a brilliant symphony of pure energetic frequencies. The contrast is absolutely heartbreaking. If this powerful resonant frequency therapy became the global standard, the implications would stretch far beyond human hospitals. Our entire global food supply would be fundamentally transformed. We currently spray millions of tons of highly toxic chemical pesticides onto our vital crops. These synthetic poisons seep deeply into the healthy soil. They violently poison the underground water reservoirs. They slowly accumulate inside our physical bodies over decades. In the Lost Timeline, toxic agriculture would be strictly outlawed as a primitive and highly dangerous practice. Farmers would simply sweep acoustic frequency fields across their massive crops. The specific invisible waves would instantly neutralize harmful bacteria and destructive parasites. The delicate crops would remain entirely pure and completely organic. The absolute purity of the global food supply would naturally elevate the baseline health of the entire human race. It is a beautiful compounding cycle of perfect natural harmony. We would live in a world where the air, the water, and the food perfectly support the energetic balance of the human body. We must also deeply consider the psychological liberation of humanity. When a person receives a terminal diagnosis today, they do not just fight the physical disease. They must fiercely battle the terrifying psychological weight of the chemical treatments. They watch their hair slowly fall out. They feel their immense physical strength violently drained away by the synthetic poisons. They are systematically reduced to fragile shadows of their former selves. The modern treatment process deliberately breaks their human spirit. In the timeline we tragically lost, the absolute dignity of the human patient remains perfectly intact. There is absolutely no traumatic loss of self. There is no agonizing physical decay caused by the supposed cure. The delicate healing process profoundly respects the sacred architecture of the human form. The patient enters the tuning chamber entirely whole and leaves the chamber even stronger. The deepest tragedy is that we simply traded a universe of pure, elegant physics for a clumsy world of toxic chemistry. We abandoned the brilliant light of the quartz prism for the dark sludge of the chemical factory. We allowed a massive system, driven entirely by endless corporate profit, to ruthlessly dictate the absolute limits of human health. Surviving data strongly suggests that the universe openly offered us a beautiful and incredibly simple cure. It offered us the elegant secret of resonant frequencies. But the powerful institutions of the time looked at that pure, invisible light and saw only a terrifying threat to their immense financial power. They systematically buried the acoustic miracles deep in the shadows. They slowly conditioned us to blindly accept the agonizing pain of chemical treatments as the only possible path to human survival. They aggressively convinced us that true healing must always be incredibly difficult, highly toxic, and devastatingly expensive. They successfully engineered a global medical culture deeply rooted in physical suffering and immense financial extraction. We must face a haunting and profound reality. We are truly living in the darkest possible timeline. We do not lack the brilliant minds to save the dying. We do not lack the elegant natural laws of physics to eradicate human suffering completely. We simply inhabit a broken reality where human illness is a fundamental pillar of the global economy. Surviving documents heavily suggest that we held the master key to unlock a beautiful disease-free world. We held the pure invisible light of acoustic frequency in our bare hands. But that golden door was deliberately welded shut. It was permanently sealed by powerful institutions that deeply profit from the chronically sick. The tragedy of Royal Raymond Rife is not just the tragic destruction of one brilliant man. It is the devastating theft of our collective human future. Every single day, millions of innocent people walk into cold, sterile hospitals. They blindly accept the agonizing pain of toxic chemical treatments. They silently endure the crushing weight of massive medical debt. They falsely believe this immense suffering is the only possible way to survive a fatal diagnosis. They do not know that a beautiful acoustic sanctuary was stolen from them almost 100 years ago. We chose the heavy and brutal hand of mass production over the elegant harmony of nature. We chose the tragic timeline where endless chemical treatment is vastly more profitable than the definitive cure. We traded a paradise of energetic healing for a prison of synthetic poison. But the universal frequencies of life are still out there. They are perfectly preserved in the natural laws of acoustic physics. They are quietly waiting for humanity to finally wake up and listen. The ultimate truth is hidden out there in the absolute silence. It is buried deep beneath a long century of corporate greed and systemic fear. What do you think about this lost timeline? Let me know down in the comments. If you enjoyed this journey through history, please hit the like button and subscribe to Timeline Divergence for more uncovering of the paths we never took. Until next time, stay curious and keep watching the timelines.